Yeah, the last one is for Helen is the cops and the robbers, and they've moved from side to side, and it talks about the cops on this side and the robbers over this side. So if you can just sort of follow the story with the light, it's obvious, the action is here or the action is there. So that would help, yeah.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear. Welcome to our 1985 Family Night. Our first item, presented by Mrs. Swartz of Mrs. Bunting's class, is a bracket of Christmas songs. Rose Trickett's Year 3-4 class are putting on the Ritz.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits? Putting on the Ritz. Different types to wear a day coat, pants with stripes and cutaway coat, perfect fits. Putting on the Ritz. Dressed up like $1,000,000 trooper, trying hard to look like Gary Cooper. Come let's mix where Rockefellers walk with sticks or umbrellas in the mix. Putting on the Ritz. Have you seen the well-to-do up and down Park Avenue on that famous thoroughfare with their noses in the air? High hats and arrow collars, white spats and lots of dollars, spending every dime for a wonderful time. If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits? Putting on the Ritz. Different types to wear a day coat, pants with stripes and cutaway coat, perfect fits. Putting on the Ritz. Dressed up like $1,000,000 trooper, trying hard to look like Gary Cooper. Come let's mix where Rockefellers walk with sticks or umbrellas in the midst. Putting on the Ritz. Trying hard to look like Gary Cooper. If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits? Putting on the Ritz. 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 Putting on the Ritz.
Mrs. Fern and Mrs. Haynes' class present a musical play, The Small One.
A long time ago, in a place far from here, there lived a poor woodcutter and his young son. The woodcutter was very poor, and his meagre livelihood depended on the strong backs of his 3 donkeys, for it was they who carried the firewood to the town marketplace. The 3 donkeys were tended by the woodcutter's son. Each day he fed them, gave them water, and gently brushed their coat. The boy loved them all, but his favourite was the oldest donkey, the one they called Small One.
Are you ready, son? Yes!
the donkeys had eaten their breakfast, the woodcutter and his boy led the animals out to the stable to begin the day's work of gathering firewood. Soon the two younger donkeys were piled high with great bundles of wood, but the boy had seen to it the small one's burn was just a bit smaller and lighter than the others. When all the wood was tied to the donkeys' backs, they began a long walk home. About halfway on the journey, they came to a steep hill. The three strong donkeys trotted sure-footedly to the top, but the poor one, even with his lighter load, wobbled and slipped and finally began to slide backwards down the hill. Racing down the hill after the sliding donkey, the boy pulled him to a hut, untied the bundle of firewood and carried it himself. Small one found it easier to climb the hill without his load. In front of him the boy staggered under his own unload of firewood.
Why are you doing small one's work? He's too tired. If he's too tired not to do his work, you'll have to sell him. No! I'm sorry, son. You must take him to market tomorrow and sell him for 1 piece of silver. All right. Stop by, small one. I'm friendly face and a good home for you. Find a friendly face to be by your side, sharing laughter, sharing tears, just like you and I. We'll find a friendly face who's gentle and true, one who's smiling, ever sharing all his love with you. Somewhere there's a special friend, somehow we will find it. Then when we say goodbye, they'll be in my place. One who needs you, one who loves you, someone with a friendly face.
And so, early next morning, the boy and his donkey made their way to the gates of the great walled city nearby. A tall guard stopped the boy at the city gate.
Stop! What do you want? I want to sell my donkey. I know someone who wants a donkey. The third shop down the road.
The two entered the dark shop and looked around. Against one wall was a stall full of frightened animals, and in the center of the room were vats full of bubbling chemicals. Animal skins hung from the walls. At the back of the shop stood two dark figures grinding a knife on a stone wheel.
What do you want? I want to sell my donkey. Will you give me a good home? Ha! I need only the skin.
The boy and the donkey walked into the shop until there were several streets away. The boy led the woman to the bustling marketplace. Perhaps somewhere among the many colorful stalls, a buyer could be found, but no one was interested in buying such an old small donkey. Suddenly the boy noticed some very greedy-looking merchants coming towards him. So the woodcutter's son led Small One off to find the auctioneer. Sure enough, down the street he found a large group of people crowded around a wooden stand listening to an auctioneer.
Who'll give me 5? Who'll give me 10? Who'll give me 15? Who'll give me 20? Who'll give me 25? What do you want? I want some more donkeys. We don't sell donkeys here. We only sell horses. It's good enough for a stick. Oh. Let me try a bit.
By the end of the day, the boy still hadn't found a home for Small One, and he couldn't go home until Small One was sold. The tired-out donkey knew there was only one solution. Small One led the woodcutter's son back towards the tanner's shop, ready to give up his life to help the boy.
But the boy wouldn't have it even if it meant never returning home. He would not sell Small One to the tanner. So the two of them sat down in an alleyway and cried. Then a shadow fell across them. The boy looked up to see a friendly face.
Why are you crying? I can't sell my donkey. I need a donkey to take my wife Mary to Bethlehem on. Would you give him a good home? Yes, I only have one piece of silver to give you. That's all right. Papa, small one.
And so the boy was able to keep his promise to sell Small One to someone special. Small One carried Joseph's wife Mary on his back all the way to Bethlehem, where she gave birth to a wonderful child named Jesus. Thus, the woodcutter's scrawny little beast of burden did become the king's donkey after all.
Someone still needs you to brighten
Mr. Trickett's Year 5, 6th class present Little Red Riding Hood.
This is the story of Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time there was a little bruiser called Red Riding Hood. This was because she always dressed up in red before going out and bashing up the local populace. Little Red Riding Hood did not live with her granny, who had taught her karate or how to fire a submachine gun, but instead she lived with her mummy in a quaint little house on the edge of a dark wood. All the animals in the forest knew Little Red Riding Hood, and they stayed as far from her as they could get, in case she threw stones at them, or trapped them, or clubbed them, or shot them with her M16. Often she went to visit her granny for karate lessons, but her mummy always said to her,
"You must never go to the woods alone, darling, or you might hurt someone very badly, and then the police would lock you up. And you know how you hate fish and rice."
Then, one sunny morning, a strange little man called at the door.
What do you want? I've got some important news for you. Well, spit it out then. No! I'll tell you only if you can guess my name. Jack, Peter, Run, John Jr. None of those.
Rumpelstiltskin really liked games like this. He'd played them before, but he didn't realise how short-tempered Red Riding Hood was, and with a little persuasion, he told Red Riding Hood her granny was very ill and needed help. Red Riding Hood was quick to respond, and immediately got into her army fatigues, grabbed her M16 and a packet of K rations for granny, and set off, forgetting all about her mother's warning. When her mother got home, she was terribly distressed, thinking Red Riding Hood was in the woods all by herself, and she rang everyone she knew to tell them to take out a life insurance policy immediately.
Hello, Cinderella. I'd call your fairy godmother if I was you and ask her for a suit of armour. Red Riding Hood had just come into the forest by herself.
But Red Riding Hood had no intention of straying from the track and wreaking havoc on the neighbourhood. She was intent on saving her granny. After all, she needed a few more karate lessons before she could go for her black belt, which would go so nicely with her red cape, just another fashion accessory available from Cultra. Suddenly, Red Riding Hood was confronted by a huge wolf with no regard for his health.
Where are you going, little girl? None of your business, fungus place.
And she put him in a headlock and relocated his vertebra for him before continuing on her way.
How silly me to be afraid of a big black wolf.
After a quick visit to the chiropractor, the wolf raced after Red Riding Hood, bent on revenge, but a bit unsure of how to achieve it. On his way, he met 7 stumpy little blokes with shovels over their shoulders, who told him where Red Riding Hood's granny lived. The wolf didn't understand a word of this and blundered off in search of a house with a little old lady. In a while, he arrived at a small house in a clearing, beautifully kept, and he raced inside.
Get lost, hairy legs!
And with that, Snow White set about the wolf with a broom. The next house he came to belonged to 3 bears, but they were not at home this day and he only met Goldilocks.
Go away! I'm having my breakfast!
As you can see, the wolf was not having a happy time, and he nearly went into fits when he saw a familiar brick house down the road. But on he went, finally arriving at the house of Red Riding Hood's granny. And this time, instead of just charging in, he thought about a suitable plan of attack. So the wolf knocked on the door, and trying to sound just like Red Riding Hood, he said,
"Open up, Granny, and hurry up about it."
Grandma, thinking that a darling granddaughter had come in her hour of need, rushed to the door and threw it open. Now, raw Granny is not a wolf's favourite meal. Much too tough. So he decided to tenderise her a bit by cooking her up in a moo-moo with some greens and sauerkraut. Top tucker. Now, while Granny was mooing away, the wolf raced inside and got ready to receive Red Riding Hood. He found some glasses and a bonnet, threw on one of Granny's nighties and dived into bed. Just in time, for the woodchopper came on one of his regular visits.
Are you in there, Judy?
So a very dejected lumberjack wended his way back into the forest. Now all this time, Red Riding Hood had been going quickly through the forest, leaving a minor trail of destruction in her wake, in her effort to get to Granny as quickly as possible. All of a sudden, she was there.
What's the matter with you, Granny? You look ugly than the last time I saw you. Come closer here. Haven't you got a kiss for your old Granny? No, you forgot to shave again. You know I get rash. My, what bloodshot eyes you have. I know, it's all the SPB you've been bringing here. What a wet nose you have, Granny. All the better to smell you with, dear. And speaking of which, you do. What kind of scarlet teeth do you have? All the better to rip the tops off SPB's balls with, dear. What a smelly breath you have. Smelly breath you have.
This was too much for the wolf, and he leapt out of bed and attacked Red Riding Hood. Meanwhile, the lumberjack decided he might visit Granny again and headed back to the quaint little house in the clearing. When he heard the screams and howls from inside the house, he knew something was wrong and he crashed into the house. And then he went through the door. And the wolf, he went back to his moo-moo, which just goes to show, being the star of a fairy tale isn't all it's cracked up to be.
Mr. Beveridge's Year 4-5 class present a mime, The Car Thief. Mrs. Sparks, Year 5-6 class present Cops and Robbers.
Here are the robbers of London town, hard-working, cops and robbers. Here are the cops of London town, hard-working, brave and true. They drink their tea, stay up till 3, and take good care of you. Here are the robbers of London town, with crowbars and skeleton keys. They prowl and creep when you're asleep, and take whatever they please. Ho ho for the robbers, the cops of the robbers, as most of us know, is dreadful Grabberdan. His voice is gruff and he's pinched enough stuff to fill a furniture van. His mates in the gang are Snatcher Jack and Billy-faced Baggy the Bag, Peg-leg Horace, Fingers Morris, and villainous Grandma Swag. Ho ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho ho! There are other criminals in the villainous crew. We meet them now. Their virtues are few. There's a slimy, sneaky, snivelling three. Slim Sam, Slick Susie, and dear me, Slinky Sally, a horrible girl who leaves her victims in a torturous whirl. And Fatty Fritters, greasy and evil, who eats like the horse and has the mind of a weevil. Ho ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho ho! Now we hear there is worse to come, for the robbers are planning. This dreadful snatching, pilfering bunch would rob a baby of his lunch. This sneaking, creeping, fingering lot would burgle a burglar. Like as not. Now we hear there is worse to come. For those robbers, they're planning the scallywag scum to make a haul on Christmas Eve of all the toys that they can thieve. Like crooked Santas they'll creep about, pinching presents, not giving them out. Ho ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho ho! The best of the cops, by common consent, is upstanding Officer Pooh. He can run like a hare, and he can fight like a bear. And he's good at crosswords too. So on Christmas Eve, when their trouble began, the station sergeant said, said the sergeant,
there are toys going missing galore. From the size of the clock, we suspect it's around, and what they need is strong arms. Ho ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho ho!
Meanwhile, outside in that gloomy street, the strong arm of the robbers was working a treat, and the strong leg too, and the beady eye, keeping watch for passers-by. In at the windows, in at the doors, down the chimneys, under the floors. Through silent rooms the robbers crept, while in their beds the children slept, dreaming of Santa Claus and snow, and what they'd get from Uncle Joe. They never knew that Uncle Morris was robbing them, and Uncle Horace.
Ho ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho ho!
The lookout man was Snatcher Jack. He stood in the doorway yawning. But when Officer Pugh came into view, Jack saw him and whistled a warning. Grandma Swag, when the warning came, was pushing a pram up the road. It was piled high with loot and stolen to boot, a thoroughly villainous load.
Now,
said Officer Pugh.
now then, what's going on here? Not much, young man.
Said the criminal Gran.
Just having a robbery, do ya?
Ho ho for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho ho! Before Officer Pugh could unravel this clue, the robbers were on him like beasts from a zoo. They knocked off his helmet and rumpled his tie, trod on his truncheon, kicked mud in his eye, pulled his ears and tickled his feet, threw half of his clothes all over the street, punched him and pummeled him, wham, bam, slam, and even ran over him with the pram.
Give up! Give up!
The robbers cried as they sat on the officers side by side.
We've got to outnumbered 10 to 1!
For in the confusion, Grandma had gone. But Officer Pugh just shook his head.
No, boys, we've hardly started yet.
He said, and he laughed a laugh, and he grinned a grin.
Sitting comfortably, are you? Yes. Then I'll begin.
With a sudden leap, he bounded free and handcuffed Horace to a nearby tree, tied Morris up in an empty sack, and beat the daylights out of Jack.
Help! Help! This isn't fair! That is not human! He fights like a bear! My mother was right! Crime doesn't pay!
And with these words, he fainted away. Our slimy, sneaky, snivelling three slunk away behind a tree. The sergeant chased them. She wasn't scared. The snarling three fought with fingernails bared. 3 to 1 the battle was fought, but the evil three's wickedness came to naught. They were beaten, handcuffed and tied, and off to prison where their tears they dried. Fatty Fritters tried to run. He was too fat and couldn't move. He is faced by a gun. Grabber Dan was last to cop it, Grandma, of course, having chosen to hop it. Dan tried to hide. The officer sought him. Dan tried to run. The officer caught him. Dan went to lift Pugh over his head. Pugh lifted Dan instead. The officer whirled him round and swung him whoosh across the road and into a bush. Down he tumbled, skidded and rolled, hit a concrete gnome and was knocked out cold. Pugh dusted his hands and sat on the wall. A little snow had begun to fall. He looked at the gnome and patted its head.
You could get a medal for this.
He said,
Ho, ho, for the brothers, the cops and the robbers, ho, ho! Ho, ho, for the brothers, the cops and the robbers, ho, ho! Ho, ho, for the brothers, the cops and the robbers, ho, ho! Ho, ho, for the brothers, the cops and the robbers, ho, ho! Ho, ho, for the brothers, the cops and the robbers, ho, ho!
Here are the cops of London town in their station at 2:30. They drink their beer and raise a cheer for upstanding Officer Pugh. Here are the robbers of London town in cells all gloomy and grim.
Let us out, not guilty!
They shout and
It wasn't me, it was him! Ho, ho, for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho, ho!
and the toys, oh, they were taken back by a Santa Claus copper with a Santa Claus sack, while the rest of the force searched day and night for an elderly lady of medium height with a fondness for earrings and red fox furs and a habit of taking what wasn't hers. She usually carried a sizable bag, and her name, of course, was
Grandma Snake! Ho, ho, for the robbers, the cops and the robbers, ho, ho!
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed tonight's performance, and thank you for being such a wonderful audience and so supportive. Thanks a lot. Good night.